So today what we're talking about specifically is the Grassroots Art Program that we have. This is funding that we receive from the state and that we sub-grant out to the organizations within our community. Cabarrus Arts Council is launching a separate grants program this year specifically for creative individuals. It's our Community Arts Seed Grant. So I'm really excited to talk about that as well, but we are going to do that at a different time. So if you've got questions about that, let me know later. We're excited to have both opportunities, this for organizations that are looking for funding and the seed grants for individuals. The Grassroots Arts Program has been a partnership between local arts councils and the North Carolina Arts Council since the 1970s. So it's really well established, and it assures that we get funding for arts programming in all 100 counties in North Carolina. So it's really essential to the vibrant ecosystem that the arts plays in our state. For counties that have populations of 50,000 or more, when the local arts council receives that grassroots funding, 50% of what we receive gets gifted out to the community through a competitive grant process. So here locally, we are also able to add to that pool that we receive from the states with support from local donors to make our pool even more robust, and because we really believe in the work of our organizations in the community. So we're excited about that. That gives us some extra funding. That is especially important in years like this year. The part of the reality that we are facing is, as our county has grown, we have now exceeded the threshold for receiving part of the $2.5 million that was allocated to grassroots funding by the state legislature 2 years ago. They put a cap on there that for Tier 3 counties with populations over 250,000 people, we wouldn't be eligible for that additional funds. So for the last 2 years, Cabarrus has been able to receive over $140,000 for grassroots. This year, that is pared back to 76,000 approximately that we'll be receiving, and then with that supporting grassroots dollars. So we have been doing a lot of advocacy in our community and with our legislators over the last year to really let them know about the impact of that rule. We continue to do that. The state has not finalized a budget for this year, but they have finalized the grassroots allocation process because North Carolina Arts Council needs to move on with that. So I think it's really imperative for all of us that rely on grassroots funding to make sure that we're talking to the legislators about the impact of that we have more people that we are expected to serve, and we are receiving nearly half of what we've received in the past to be able to do that work. And that makes our jobs much more challenging. One of the key tenets of grassroots grant dollars is that it's, as you can see, it's funds that are dispersed to all 100 counties. And the intention is that that the funds be used in a way that really represent the communities that we serve. And so part of our evaluation process as we look at application is to make sure that we are spending our funds in a way that really represent all of the different components of our community, the cultural diversity, the geographic diversity of who we are serving and where we are serving. And so that is a part of our evaluation process in the end. And some of the questions in the application help us get to really understanding, do we have that full community representation that we're aiming for as we support programming across Cabarrus County? There's some key eligibility requirements for grassroots funds. Organizations that apply have to have been in operation for at least 1 year. So part of the questions that we're asking is, tell us about last year's budget and how does that compare to what you are asking for this upcoming year? So you can't answer that if you haven't been in operation for at least a year. We do require that anyone applying to Cabarrus Arts Council for grassroots funding is an organization that resides and carries their projects out here in Cabarrus County. So we definitely have some local organizations that serve statewide, but these funds are intended to serve Cabarrus County specifically. Likewise, there are people from other counties that may be carrying out really good work in Cabarrus, but this is specifically to support those who are here in Cabarrus. So that is our intention with these funds. Projects for this year must take place between July 1st of 2025 through June 15th of 2026. Of course, our applications aren't due until October 15th, so that does allow for some retroactive funding, and your budget's going to be a really key part of us seeing that those funds were indeed a part of this fiscal year that we're supporting through this grant allocation. We will only consider complete applications that are received by October 15th at noon. So be sure you've marked that specific deadline on your calendars with all of the bells and whistles, because Heather is glad to receive all of the applications. She will check for their completeness. The earlier you submit, the earlier we're able to do that evaluation and get back to you if we're missing something. So definitely make sure that you're paying attention to that due date, because as soon as we hit October 15th at noon, we begin the process of getting the materials out to our panelists and conducting that review process. So if it comes in later, we really are bound by the due date and won't be able to consider those applications. For sub-grant requirements, so you all are sub-grantees because the Arts Council has received the grant from the state and we are now sub-granting to you. It is required that for any of the applications that you bring a one-to-one cash match for any funds that you're requesting for. So as an example, if you have a project that costs $10,000 to implement, you can request up to $5,000 and show that you have the ability to match that with cash with another $5,000. If the project costs $10,000 and you think you're only going to be able to raise $1,000, we can't help you cover that gap. So make sure that what you are proposing really does fit within those guidelines. For our organizations that are applying for operational funds, so these are organizations that have a primary mission of arts programming and are doing so in a year-round capacity. The requirement that we have here in Cabarrus is that we can provide at most a quarter of your annual budget, because all of the work that you're doing is arts centered. So we have different categories of funding that we do here and some adjustments to those guidelines. If you are an arts organization, that's all you do. So you are the band, you are the theater, you are the chorus, you are a arts studio, then I would recommend that you use our operating support, organizational support guidelines. If you are part of an organization that does arts programming, but it's part of a broader mission, so you are part of school, you are part of health services, you're part of mental health care, and you're using the arts to help advance your mission, you're applying using the project assistance grant. We also prioritize arts education. So in that case, you want to follow the guidelines for programming with schools. So one-to-one cash match, if you're an organization, really you're looking at up to a quarter of your full budget for the year. We do require that every grantee acknowledge both the North Carolina Arts Council as well as the Cabarrus Arts Council in in your marketing for the event and wherever you're recognizing donors. So we will provide you with all of the logos and credit line information to meet those guidelines. But that's a really important part of people seeing that their tax dollars that they're giving that supports Grassroots are actually having an impact in our community. So we really do follow up in making sure that that recognition is readily available on your website or in your programs or on posters that are available at your events. There are some other reporting requirements after you have submitted your application. Everybody is required to submit a final report where you're indicating about the participation and the evaluation of your program. We require that everybody who receives Grassroots funding sends thank you letters to our state legislators. It helps them to really see, as they continue to support Grassroots funding, why that makes a difference here in our community. So those thank you letters can come at any time, whenever you have a story to share with your state legislators, we really encourage you to reach out to them to let them know about the impact of the work you're doing. It's a great opportunity to reach out to them and invite them to come to your programs so that they can see that work happening in our community. The other piece that you are required to submit is your no overdue tax form. That is your statement that you are indeed caught up in your fiscal responsibilities to the state before you're receiving more state funding. What will Grassroots grants fund? We will fund a lot of things. We will fund program expenses for projects of high artistic merit, including artist fees, the travel for artists to come to your space. If you are needing to rent a space to be able to host your programs, we'll help with marketing, advertising, costumes or sets or props, music, equipment rental. So really, anything related to the artistic programming that you're bringing to the community, we can support with the grant. Again, organizational support for organizations that have a primary mission of arts, we can support administrative costs for your organization as well. And that's where the up to a quarter of your annual budget is the guideline that we use for arts organizations only. We cannot support administrative costs for project assistance or for arts education assistance. Those costs are assumed by your organization. What we can't fund with the grant, this is not a grant for individual creatives. And as I said, we have our Creative Seed grant that we are announcing this year that will be a great chance for individual applicants. Also, the Cabarrus Arts Council has long supported the Artist Support Grants that is actually administered through the Arts and Science Council in Charlotte. That deadline was last week, and that is a means for getting support to individual creatives. Grassroots grants is intended for community organizations in Cabarrus. The grant will not fund art supplies. And what that means is if there are materials that you need for carrying out an arts workshop, that is fine. But we are not stockpiling your art supply closet with these funds. So the funds need to be used directed to a specific project. We cannot support fundraising events or expenses with Grassroots dollars, no food or beverages. We can't support prizes, tuition, or scholarships with these funds. So the funds need to be used for the program or event itself rather than getting passed on to the next cycle. We have already subgranted. It can't be subgranted. School band activities or equipment are not allowed as part of this. The purchase of artwork is not a component of this grant. We're not supporting internal programs for schools, colleges, universities, or libraries. We're really looking at that external community programming that's happening. And we are also not able to support programs that have a religious content to them. Let me go over the application itself. The first component that you're going to be filling out is your basic organization information. I want you to be really clear about who the main contact is when you're filling out this organization information. It needs to be somebody that is going to be receiving the updates from myself and Heather about your grant requirements, about receiving the funding. So make sure that you are really clear of who your contact person is for this grant. That's who we're going to be contacting throughout the year as those updates and requirements are requested. Um, you're including your mailing address, the city that you're serving, the county should always be Cabarrus in this answer. If it's not, then you're probably filling out the wrong application. Um, we do ask for the email address to reach out to your website, your organization's employer identification number, and also the UEI. Now, the UEI is a new number that the federal government has been using for the past several years. Um, Not every organization has gone through the process to get their UEI, but that is going to become a necessary function for nonprofits moving forward. The advice that I received from North Carolina Arts Council this year is that so far they won't be turning away organizations if they don't have a UEI, but that's probably very close on the horizon. So I really encourage you to go ahead, if you don't have a UEI, to go ahead um, through the federal government to get that number secured. If you have questions about that, please reach out to me, Liz at cabarrusartscouncil.com, and I can send you the website to set that up. It takes some time to go through that process. The Beyond that organization information, we're going to ask you to give a brief description of your organization. What is your mission? How is your board and staff composed? What are current art programs and services and the numbers of people you reach, the kinds of people that you are able to serve through your programs? Really, we're looking at the specific descriptions. If you are part of a broader, we're part of Cabarrus County. We're looking at specifically the arts program that you're applying for funding for here. But this gives us a really good sense, not necessarily of the project that you are proposing, but of who you are as an organization that's presenting this work and asking for funds. The second piece that we ask is for your projected operating budget for this year. This is looking at your operating budget as a whole. So again, this may be beyond just what you're requesting for in this grant, but gives us a sense of the context of how this grant might fit into the overall budget of your organization. Remember, we do request an attached financial statement from your most recent completed fiscal year. So that's your end of year budget. It could be audit reports. That gives us that sense of your fiscal responsibility in the past, that gives us the assurance that you are going to be able to carry out the work that you're presenting in the future. Again, this question we use here to be able to make sure that we're understanding who you are as an organization. So each application is going to select one of these boxes. Either I am applying for a Cabarrus-based arts organization with at least 75% of our programming that's conducted within the county. If you are checking that box when you're reading through the guidelines, be sure you're looking at the organizational support guidelines. If you are applying for project funding, you are saying, I am applying for a Cabarrus-based organization that is requesting support specifically for arts programming. In that case, you have to show the one-to-one match, and $5,000 is the maximum request. We have implemented that maximum this year because of the shortage of funding that we're receiving from the state. And we want to assure that we're still able to get the reach of funding across the county. And so that $5,000 maximum is a new maximum that we have put in for project funding for this year, because our funding source has been cut in half. It's the way that we can assure that we are continuing to reach the full breadth of our community. The third application guidelines that you can follow are if you are applying on behalf of an arts education program. This is programming that's happening in a preschool, an elementary, middle, or high school in Cabarrus County, public or private, and you're applying specifically for arts work that is happening outside of the regular school day. Or outside of the regular school curriculum. So you might be bringing in an artist in residence to support a special project with the school, an after-school program, something that is enhancing the work that is regularly taught by your teachers. Again, that requires a one-to-one cash match with a maximum grant award of $5,000. The next category that we're looking at, component that we're looking for within your application, is really getting into the details of the specific project you're proposing for FY26. We start by asking you to give us a project title. Really, don't think of this doesn't have to be a creative title. What we're looking for is a summary description. The Mount Pleasant Friends of the Library is seeking funding for our second annual Literary Arts Festival. That's a perfect title. It gives you kind of somebody can read that and know exactly what you're requesting funding for. If there are any significant community partnerships, you might want to include that in your summary description as well. I strongly encourage folks, as you're doing this, we have them list these components for the narrative numbered. I would go ahead and put the number. I am answering question 1, project title and summary description. I'm answering question 2, project goals. That makes sure that you know that you are answering every question that our panel needs to have answered as they're making their decisions. For project goals, what we're really looking for is you to describe how will you know that you've been successful? What are you hoping participants will learn or gain from their interaction with your organization and through this arts project? How will the community be impacted by the project? We want you to be specific about your audience and location. So tell us who your intended audience or participants are. I know many of us have we want to serve the whole community, and we would love to see every member of Cabarrus County show up for our theater events, our band show, our wonderful festivals that we have in the community. But we also know that it's not every 250,000 person in our county that shows up for the events. Who are you specifically wanting to show up? If there is a group that if they weren't there, you wouldn't have done your job, that's who you need to list as your intended audience. The example given here, we expect the community participation will be 200 adults and 300 middle school age children, with approximately 64% Caucasian and 46% to be African American. It tells us kind of what ages you're looking at, what racial or cultural backgrounds folks have. It tells us about how many. You don't win points for reaching thousands of people versus 10 people. What we're looking at is the quality of your work for the intended audience you mean to serve. So we know that there can be really in-depth programming that impacts 20 people that can be just as valuable as a large scale community event that maybe reaches thousands. So there's not a right or wrong answer. You don't have to try to go for the most. What we're looking for is clarity, that you know who you are intending to serve. We also ask for specific details about the location of your project. If you have the address of where this is going to happen, that helps us know, are we making sure that we've got programming that we are supporting in Kannapolis and in Midland and in Mount Pleasant and in Harrisburg and in Concord? We want to be able to say that we are supporting programs all across our county. And so being specific about the location of your events makes a difference for us. In describing your activities and the artists, again, giving us kind of details. This project is going to happen over 8 weeks from January to March. It is People are going to gather for 1 hour each week, and they're going to meet with this specific artist that's going to lead them through a workshop experience. More details that you can provide here, the better picture that our panelists are going to have. The folks that we bring in as panelists for Grassroots grants are very involved in the community and have a really good sense of who we are as a county, but that does not mean that they're necessarily experienced with your organization, or especially if you're presenting a new program, what that program's going to entail. You providing this description really helps them get a feel for what are the activities that are going to happen? What does this investment actually mean for our community? I want you to be specific about the artists that you are hiring to be a part of this. Making sure that we are supporting the lives of creative individuals through Grassroots really does make a difference here. So tell us who you have chosen to lead your projects, how they were chosen, what you are paying them. You don't get bonus points for getting free artist support. We're really meaning to support the livelihood of artists. So we know that there's really good volunteer support, but supporting our artists is also an important element of Grassroots funding. If you haven't yet selected your artist, tell us how they will be selected, and what are the qualities and qualifications that you're looking for in the artist that will be leading the project. For marketing and evaluation, tell us how your project will be publicized and promoted. Um, Again, this ties into, you've already given us a description of who your intended audience is. With marketing, we should be able to see how you are specifically reaching out to that intended audience. If there's not a connection between how you're doing your publicity and who you're intending to reach, you're going to have a hard time accomplishing your goals. So we're really looking at how you are tailoring your marketing to reach that intended audience. Um, we also want to know how your project will be evaluated. Are you going to do formal surveys? Are you relying on participant feedback, and who's going to be collecting that feedback? Do you have specific revenue goals that you mean to reach with this project? Is there a particular community impact that you are wanting to have through the project? How will you know that you've been successful? The third element of the application is your project budget. And with the project budget, we're really breaking that down into what are your expenses and what is your income. Looking specifically at the project expenses, you'll see outlined here several of the eligible expenses that you are able to request support for. Beyond what you provide in this form, you will also share your project budget that might be in a format that is used internally to your organization, so that your own project budget might give more detail than what we have in this form. You'll submit both. Um, Administrative staff, that is an allowable expense if you are applying for an arts organization. If you are applying on behalf of a project, we're really looking at your administrative staff or technical staff that are required for the success of your programs. Um, these might not be staff, these might be artistic contracts or other contracts that you have. Maybe you're hiring somebody to assist with marketing, or to set up a stage for you for your festival. We can include space rental, travel, marketing costs, any other remaining project expenses. And again, that's where your separate budget is going to give us more detail about those remaining project expenses. To meet that one-on-one match, we're looking at both what is covered, what are you anticipating being covered by the grant versus what are you providing as part of your cash match. So if you have $5,000 in expenses for your artistic contracts, perhaps $2,500 of that is going to be covered by the grant, and $2,500 of that will be supported with other funding that you're bringing to the table as part of your match. Maybe you're asking for the grant to cover all $5,000 of those artistic contracts, and what your organization is bringing is the $5,000 invested in technical and production staff. So your match doesn't have to be an exact split on the same line of the grant amount versus the cash match from other sources, but it does at the end need to total that you have at least a one-to-one match. If you're requesting $5,000, but the project is $20,000, you want to show that you have the $15,000 lined up for your match. It exceeds what the minimum requirement is of one-on-one, but shows that you have an intention, you know what your full expenses are and an intention to support that. With project income, this is really where we're going to understand for all of the expenses that you just listed, that you have a means to cover those expenses, that you have a plan for covering those expenses. We don't expect that all of your other sources are necessarily confirmed at this time, but they should be realistic. So listing out if you have revenue coming in, maybe you're selling tickets for your show or an entrance fee for your festival. Maybe you're seeking corporate support or other foundation support, listing those sources of support. If there's other government support, we need to pay attention if there is support that you're receiving from state or federal sources to make sure that we don't have, that we're not double dipping, that you're getting funding from the same source as we're pulling from for the grassroots grants. So if you are using other federal or state funding, be sure to list that here so that we can dig into that and make sure that we don't have a conflict. Maybe your match is just coming from funds that you have already raised in the past, and so that is your applicant cash that you're bringing to the project. You'll name specifically how much you are asking for in this grant, and that total cash income must be equal to or greater than what your expenses are for the program. Finally, I want to talk about how our panel will evaluate each of the applications that they receive. So the subgrant panel is comprised of community members here in Cabarrus. So it's folks who are familiar with our community and familiar with arts programming in our community, and with a real interest in making sure that we all are able to thrive. The panelists are going to base their funding decisions on the quality of the grant application, not their relationship with or knowledge of the organization. So if you want them to consider something in their decision about your application, you need to make sure that is in your application materials. Don't assume that they're going to know that you had real great success with the program last year. They won't unless you specifically outline that in your application materials. Panelists review overall completeness of the grant, and they score these applications based on specific criteria. Those criteria include the artistic quality of the proposed project. This is where the more specific you can be about the artists that are leading the project, the better. Giving some of their background and their qualifications helps speak to the artistic merit of the program. They want to know about the community impact of the project. Who is likely to be impacted by the work that you're doing, and what is that impact likely to mean in their life? they want to see that you've got a plan and a plan to make that implementation possible. So if you're telling them that you're asking for $5,000 for $1 million project, you better have really clear information about how you were going to raise that over $999,000 other beyond what the grant is, right? This needs to be a reasonable and supported plan given the people that you have involved in your project. The other piece that they're evaluating is the stability and fiscal responsibility of the organization. We are using community funds and state funds, and we need to be good stewards of that and make sure that we are supporting programs that have demonstrated they can be good stewards of that community investment. We do set out specific funding priorities. This is given to us from the state. So the first priority that we have is to make sure that we are supporting organizations whose primary purpose is within the arts. Arts organizations often aren't eligible for other types of grant funding. And so when we have arts funding, we want to make sure that it's going to those organizations. The second priority is to really make sure that we're supporting arts learning and arts in education programs conducted by qualified artists. So these can be artist residencies with our schools, after school programs, summer camps, adult learning activities. So that is the priority. And then the third priority is making sure that we're supporting other community and civic and municipal organizations that are providing high quality experiences using the arts in our community. So that as we go through the application process, we are looking at the merit and we are also looking at making sure that we're supporting these priorities within our community. If you get funded, and for each of you, I'm going to say when you get funded and put it out there as an optimistic intention, your organization will enter into a contractual agreement with Cabarrus Arts Council. We will have you submit your no overdue tax form to us. We will also make sure that we have your W-9 form completed and those details that we need to have on hand for our contracts with the Cabarrus Arts Council. You will have then through June 15th to complete your programming, and your final report is due to the Cabarrus Arts Council by June 30th at the latest. With that final report, we're really looking at who were your audience, how many were in your audiences, and what was the audience demographic. So that is something for you to really think about at the front end of your planning, is how are you going to capture both audience numbers and the demographics for folks participating in your programs. We do require that you all demonstrate that you're using the North Carolina Arts Council logo as well as the Cabarrus Arts Council logo and credit line on your promotional materials. And you'll need to provide samples of those materials at the end. So be sure you're keeping track of that as you move along. Grant payments may be distributed in installments. Typically with Cabarrus Arts Council, we like to distribute those funds in a lump sum at the front end. We will do that once your grant has been approved and we have received the funding from the state to be able to distribute to the community. Those distributions from the state, that has not happened yet. So as soon as we have it and we have your grant approved, we will be sending out that information to you once we have all of your final documentation in. We do ask you to keep us up to date on the progress of your program. We really look forward to amplifying your marketing through our events calendar that we have on our website, through the events column that we submit to the Independent Tribune. We're able to, when you tag us in your social media and include the Arts Council there, we're able to amplify that by resharing some of your social media content. So we are really glad to be your partner in that. But you got to keep us in the loop and make sure that you are tagging the Arts Council when you do that so that we can share that information out. if something changes and you either can't use all of your funds or you need to change how you are using your funds based on um, kind of changes of how you're going to implement your program, let us know up front so that we can approve those changes, or if you're not going to be able to use the full funds, that we can reallocate that to other programs. Um, so definitely stay in touch with us throughout everything. And as with the deadline for the application, we also can't receive late final reports. So June 30th is going to be the latest to submit your final report. If we don't have it, we can't report to the state. And that really inhibits our ability to get the funding moving forward in the future. So that is a hard and fast rule that your final reports have to be submitted by June 30th. If you have questions about your application or whether the program that you're proposing is eligible for funding, reach out to me. I am very glad to have any conversation about what you're proposing and ways that that can be of service to our community. So go to me for any questions about content and eligibility of programming.